Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. Yay! We made it to Friday. Friday, August 16th, 2024. Time for another show. Time to end the week. Time to close things out. Time to send college boy number 2 back to school. So that's the weekend activity. Should be fun. Not really ready to let him go back just yet. But okay, that's what we're doing today. And we'll be spending the day, catching up on all the craziest stuff that happened. I mean, we're back, I guess, into that cycle. It's too bad. We had a nice break. It was called the Biden administration, during which there wasn't always daily news about how crazy Donald Trump was. Although there was always Donald Trump news. He makes sure of that. But the vast majority of it was Donald Trump is in trouble. Donald Trump. All right. Donald Trump is indicted. He's falling asleep in court. He's farting in court. That was entertaining and good stuff. And we entertain ourselves with the crazy stories now. But now we have to deal with them as, technically, people get to choose whether or not he's going to be president again. And that's sad and disturbing. And I guess it makes room for the crazy. So let's see. Yesterday, but we also have some other stories to set up for you. Things I promised to do off air and review beforehand, and now realize, oh yeah, that was the thing I wanted to do. I wanted to read to make sure whether this was good for the air or not. All right, well anyway, Donald Trump had a crazy press conference yesterday, and now everybody has to talk about that, and it's already been on the Daily Show, so although I think the Daily Show bit that I just saw this morning was actually the Tic Tac speech, which, though though economic in nature, it was not. It was cast as being economic in nature, but yesterday was the big press conference. I think he was supposed to be doing a 1-2 punch, like a major economic address that he billed. I mean, he was going to do a major economic address to address the issues from a broad theoretical perspective because of his command of them, and then do a press conference to answer questions, sort of more casual conversation with the press about economic issues. But he was going to address the intellectual academics of the economic situation the day before, and he did that with the Tic Tac show, which, again, was him holding up 2 different product sizes of Tic Tac and claiming, that's inflation. And there's so much going on in that, and yet nothing going on in that one. Of course, you can't hold up 2 different sizes of product and say, I think the implication he meant for people to take away from it was that for $1 you used to be able to buy this many Tic Tacs, but now for $1 you can only buy this many Tic Tacs, which is not only not true, but is not inflation per se. It's actually shrinkflation, which is the thing. I learned about it from a guy who took economics, a big economics course. In fact, was a major in economics, and it's a thing. So that there where they keep the price point the same, but give you less product, or sometimes perceptibly less. Sometimes it's attempted to make it imperceptible that there's less, or they change the size. I don't know, keep the size of the box the same but put less in it. Those sorts of things. But that's not what's going on here. And the thing that's illustrated by the 2 different sizes of a product is not inflation. It's not even shrinkflation. So no help there. But the Daily Show had a great time with it, and I should see if I can go and find that clip so I can share it with you. I saw it fly by this morning, and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to dig it up or not. But, you know where to find the Daily Show. Like, they have a whole situation going on. They have production staff. So there's a website and a yada and a this and that, and they got the clips, and it's really good. And, okay, so then he went and had a press conference about inflation and how, I guess, he must have I guess taken to heart maybe things like Frank Luntz was saying. You remember yesterday's playing through of the panicked Frank Luntz Squawk Box television show appearance. And you know it was an emergency because I watched Squawk Box. I've never seen it before. It's the damnedest thing. I see that, again, it strikes me as weird. It's one of those weird things that goes on that side. I flipped by the television guide channel back in the olden days when I would have channels. Now I have to just stream everything. That's inflation. Anyway, Squawk Box came up all the time, and I always wondered, the hell is that? And there's an Asian Squawk Box, which made me think that there was something wrong with this whole series here. But anyway, I guess it's for people who like watching stock tickers, or I want to watch a channel with stock ticker stuff on it, because economics is the price of the stock and how much money can I make selling stock so I can buy super yachts and cocaine. That's the economy. And I don't know. Some people just think that that's really fantastic to watch. So Squawk Box, I guess, is watched by billionaires, or at least one that Frank Luntz knew about. And he wanted Trump to talk about not inflation, but I already forget how he put it. But basically, talk about rising prices and just things getting out of control in terms of prices. And you can't, food, fuel, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what else he even put in his basket there. But, it's a serious consideration. You got to be able to afford these things or you're in dire straits. But it's a bigger problem than just inflation. And, of course, if you look at inflation, if you're one of those people who is interested in reporting on the economy, you're going to watch Squawk Box. They will tell you on Squawk Box, I think, without lying, that inflation is below 3% at the moment. It's not inflation that is the current issue. There was inflation. And I suppose perhaps I didn't track it well enough to know whether we had so much inflation that the residual effects of it are prices remained high, but then inflation lowered, so they're just taking more profit by keeping prices where they were. They're not going to cut prices when inflation drops because they can get that money from people. So, I guess there's some residual effects of earlier inflation, although a lot of that earlier in the Biden administration inflation was fallout from COVID, the collapse of the supply chain, some might say the mismanagement of that recovery from the collapse of the supply chain, etc. Anyway, Trump decided to have his press conference to address this issue, and so I think he listened to advisors up until it was time to do the press conference, of course. And maybe he may have stopped listening to them before then. What I mean is he agreed to let them try to create an event that would address the kitchen table issues. This is very literally a kitchen table issue for of people facing rising prices at the grocery store. That's a real thing. And of course, to get Trump to do an event about a real thing, well, that's a pretty major undertaking. He does not know what real things are. He certainly doesn't have any idea about rising food prices. He's never been shopping for food, and to the extent anybody may have dragged him along or he accidentally made it into a store, he didn't care what the price points were. So it didn't matter a great deal, and it never has, and so he was out of his element. Secondly, of course, what they did was, and I say it was a kitchen table issue, they took the tables out of not the kitchen, but the dining room and the buffet area, I guess, of the he's at, what's the name of the New Jersey club, the golf club that is, I keep forgetting now. It's Bedminster. And they took the tables out of there. I mean, they really had like craft services type tables that are covered in, generic black, nylon, whatever, tablecloths, and took the breakfast display, the bowls of oranges, Granny Smith apples, yum. Good for pies, not great for eating, if you ask me. And but then also breakfast cereals that they might have out there and put in those little weird dispensers that you turn the handle and the stuff spills out. Fruit Loops, Cheerios, but they also had Wheaties. They had Campbell's soup out there, Progresso soup out there. Lovely items and all. But Wonder Bread, hamburger and hot dog rolls, bottles of ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise and relish, like they were going to have a cookout. which I think means they raided the kitchen at Bedminster and took all this stuff out there, and we're going to show you what it is to make it through the day as a regular person. This weirdo, reclusive, germ-phobic billionaire, maybe, who cheats everyone at everything, is going to invite you to his major golf club. There he lives on a golf club. The initiation fees at this golf club, by the way, if you want to stop by and experience the wonder of delicious Wonder Bread hot dog rolls and other treats, $350,000 initiation fee, as I understand, $14,000 to $20,000 in annual dues, and they wanted you to all come by after a round of golf and express your concern for people who are having difficulty putting food on the table. And, of course, some of the difficulty that they're having putting food on the table has to do with the cost of that food. Some of it has to do with the fact that the food displayed at this press conference expired in 1988. Wheaties? Wheaties was on the table. Coffee, a staple for most people. But if you're talking, popular coffee brands, the big, industrial-sized, office-sized plastic canisters of Folgers Crystals and Maxwell House. Not like cutting-edge stuff. Granted, it's lower in price and it's probably pretty popular. Pardon me. And people are, it's not that they're not buying it still. It's just, it's institutional coffee. Some people got used to the taste, and that's why I fixed my coffee tastes in 1975, and just going forward, that's the coffee I want. Sure, fine, okay. It just doesn't seem particularly in tune with where people are. Certainly not people at his club. I'm surprised. They probably are offended. They found out, Mike, this coffee is Folgers? No, we replaced the coffee at the Bedminster Golf Club with Folgers. Again, in 1988. Let's see if they notice, and the answer is no, they're all high on cocaine. They do not know. Anyway, so there you have it. He reached out to mainstream America from his mid-1980s mindset where everything was locked into place. Can you believe the price of Tab Cola? Light and lively, sweet and low for your delicious Folgers coffee. By the way, mountain grown, some of the richest, most aromatic kinds of coffee. Total Werther's Original probably on the table. Really not cutting edge stuff. I will say that. And of course, by the way, I had to buy Wheaties. Bought the commemorative Billie Jean King Wheaties box. Probably didn't notice it. Probably didn't. Had it been a Democrat, of course, they would have said, look, woke cereal because Billie Jean King. But not for them. Anyway, had a press conference supposedly about economics. Spent the whole time saying, Kamala Harris, she's so terrible, and I hate Barack Hussein Obama. What about Sleepy Joe? Crooked Joe? And the whole time, didn't have a damn thing to say about economics, and only part of the press actually noticed. I believe they asked them questions, tough questions in the Q&A portion, like, why do you think God spared your life in the assassination attempt? So, hard-hitting economic news for them. So that's what went on yesterday. Now, what's interesting is that still is top of the news, even for us, when there was actually some other important stuff going on yesterday. And I gather that, I think they handled it well at Harris headquarters. They did a great job, by the way, in mocking both events. And they even put out their own media advisory. We've gotten to the point now where Donald Trump's public appearances are so cringe and embarrassing for him and for his fellow Republicans who are constantly saying, please stop doing these events this way. You have to focus on the issues. And he can't. He doesn't care what the issues are. But they've realized how bad it is every time he opens his mouth. They've taken to promoting his events. The Kamala Harris's HQ puts out media advisories telling people there's a Donald Trump event happening. You should go watch it. You will come away with a worse impression of Donald Trump and a better impression of me. This is the guy, of course, who thinks that all publicity is good publicity. And he's, I guess, finally, the tank has run dry on that one. But, they of course, take their opportunity to take a shot at him. And they said, I think the way she phrased it, I think I may even have put aside a social media post including one of these things. Yeah, here we go. From Blue Sky, Steve Herman, who is where? W7VOA. I assume is he from Voice of America, VOA? And he displays this press release from the Harris-Walz campaign. It says, up at the top usually it says, for planning purposes, and then the date. This says, for planning purposes, reluctantly. August 15th, 2024, media advisory. Today, Donald Trump to ramble incoherently and spread dangerous lies in public, but at different home. So moving from Pervalago's sex dungeon in Florida up to Bedminster sex dungeon and golf club and goat farm in New Jersey. And cemetery, by the way. Totally not weird, burying your ex-wife at your golf club. And so there you go. So, and he says, it says here, today at 4:30 p.m., Donald J. Trump, loser of the 2020 election by 7 million votes, will hold another public meltdown in Bedminster, New Jersey. They certainly nailed it on that one. Let's see. Oh, there's a little bit more here. Preview. Not so fresh off the NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, right? Florida and Twitter glitches. Donald Trump intends to deliver another self-obsessed rant full of his own personal grievances to distract from his toxic Project 2025 agenda, unpopular running mate, and increasing detachment from the reality of the voters who will decide this election. These remarks will not be artificial intelligence, but they certainly will lack intelligence. By the way, yeah, I think there was an AI line dropped by Trump yesterday, or at least one that's convincingly AI. Banning abortion, raising costs on families, confusing basic facts, cutting Social Security and Medicare, blocking border security, and being publicly unstable, unfit, and unwell will not help his struggling campaign for president. Tune in for the same old thing. And that's a pretty good press release. And an unusual practice, to say the least, to now publicize your opponent's public events and have it, be of net benefit to you. It's really rather remarkable. So another comment, I don't mean to, but I just feel it's naturally the case. And sometimes I feel, am I just doing what Trump wants, focusing on him? But it's so much fun to make fun of him. We're not winning him any converts here. I think it's pretty safe. And some of this stuff enters the public domain and people will make jokes about it. And if you don't know the background, you're not going to be able to laugh as heartily as you would otherwise. So this is, I think, a tremendous public service. Better even, you might say, than the Congressional Medal of Honor. All right. Do you get that reference? Do you get the joke? If you don't, I'll tell you the background of it, and then when somebody else makes it, you'll be prepared. This one, I think, it's difficult to, sort Trump comments out and definitively say, this one should be in the running. You can never just pinpoint one, but this one should be in the running. A close contender for the dumbest thing he's ever said. And yeah, I know, I am. There's no point in trying to catalog that. But this one has it all in terms of offensiveness, baselessness, pandering, and should be political suicide. And it's got it all. NBC News has a report. I grabbed it here, and I think I put also aside maybe my initial find on this on social media as well. Yeah. Oh, and so they were on it. Kamala HQ had it last night and has the video clip, which is the most damning part of it. And I guess, why don't I guess I could arrange to play it. It's Trump. I don't know where he is. But he's got American flags behind him, as he usually does. But he also has Israeli flags behind him, as he frequently does. But it must be that he's at some, Jewish donor event. Because one, he's got those two flags behind him. And two, he's talking about Miriam Adelson. You remember the widow of Sheldon Adelson, former billionaire, now dead. So he's former everything, really. Former billionaire, big donor a big supporter of, like, fanatical, maybe too crazy about it, maybe too much Netanyahu fan supporter of Israel. Maybe too much. Definitely too much. And Miriam Adelson, she, I guess you could say by comparison to Sheldon Adelson, she was somewhat more normal-ish. Anyway, but now she's a huge Trump donor, so that's off. Now she's a wackadoodle, and you should rightly shun her. Anyway, he's giving these remarks. I guess he sees her in the front row and wants to say something special about her. Now, you may recall that Trump did, in fact, award her a Presidential Medal of Freedom while he was president. And everyone remembers that he was president, right? It was terrible. And so he's acknowledging that. And then he decides, he comes up with, I don't know what it is. He's trying to make it seem like it was an even bigger honor than it was. And I don't know. I think you kind of have to hear it in his own words. All right, where can I go to the back to the okay, here we go. I think I've got the clip up and the volume turned up. So here we go. Here's Trump speaking at this thing.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead.
Wow.
She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman.
I mean, I don't even know.
They're rated equal.
They're rated equal. I don't know how to make that point any clearer. I hope it came across well. It looked like it went out fine. I mean, we gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's much better than the Congressional Medal of Honor to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom, of course. Why? Because the soldiers who get the Congressional, and by the way, that's great. This is the transcription of it from Kamala HQ here. Does he just end the sentence there? I don't recall. It's much better than the Congressional Medal of Honor because soldiers get the Congressional. I mean, first of all, as a complete thought, if that was one, what? And then, of course, I'll clear it up. Why is it better to get this other one? Because soldiers get this one, and soldiers are filthy, dirty, disgusting suckers. As you know, remember, of course, he said anybody who volunteers for combat for their country is a sucker and an idiot, and who cares? And besides which, let's say you get shot down as a pilot and you're captured in Vietnam. I prefer people who weren't shot down, okay? And so he goes on to say, though, by the way, not only are they filthy, dirty, disgusting soldiers, but those soldiers are in very bad shape. They're in bad shape because they've been hit by so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman, and they're rated equal. They're not rated equal. And I mean, this is supposed to. What do you make of it next time a Republican who supports this guy says thank you for your service to somebody? I mean, give me a break. That's just insane. But, of course, nothing happens, right? It was supposed to end his career when he came out with the McCain line. I prefer people who weren't shot down, okay? And, now they're hit so many times by bullets. I prefer people who weren't hit by bullets, okay? Oh, wait a minute. I was just hit by a bullet. Well, I prefer me, but not you. Basically, okay. So, I don't know where this even was. But this, too, will not be the top of the news somehow. But anyway, what it all overshadowed, I guess, and what might frustrate the planners over at Harris Walls, although I think they're perfectly happy with these clips. They're clearly happy to promote them, and I'm clearly happy to talk about them. There was a joint appearance yesterday, a joint public appearance at a rally with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that was covered in light of like an official passing of the torch and a recounting of all of the accomplishments of the Biden administration, and they are many, and they should reflect well on Kamala Harris. But this is sort of an event that people kind of have been waiting for since this whole succession thing was arranged, and then it happened. and it was overshadowed. And if you didn't care about politics at all, apparently the Matthew Perry story would overshadow everything. Not something we've been following, but just in case, or rather, I don't know what. I guess I just have to tick this one off my list because it happened. Matthew Perry died. That we may or may not have covered at the time. But ketamine apparently at the root cause of his death, and of course his addiction problems over the years. And they have charged the doctors who were responsible for getting him the ketamine that killed him. And part of the charging documents, I guess, they have texts between these two doctors that are about the most damning thing I've ever seen in my life. So popular culture will almost certainly be obsessed with that one. One doctor texting to the other. Essentially, let's see, I wonder how much this idiot will pay for this poisonous drug that we're giving him. And he's a rich guy. Let's take advantage of him and steal all the money we can, essentially, and see how far it goes. And then not only did they presumably overcharge him from the ketamine, but then the ketamine killed him. And I think that's more or less you're going to prison. You were a doctor and a member of a respected profession, and now probably going to jail because, I don't know, you just decided that there was money to be stolen. So that doesn't reflect well either. Of course, Trump will cut their taxes, so that's, I guess, a silver lining to the whole thing. And they'll be able to keep more of the money that they stole from Matthew Perry for murdering him. So there you go. And if any of the money was tips, well, it's tax-free. So there you go. Donald Trump thinks that the Presidential Medal of Freedom is better than the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is a dumb thing to say in the first place, and that medals of honor go to losers who have been shot, and nobody likes them. So, all right, what a great start. What a Friday beginning. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kgrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Justice Putnam, by the way, sends me the note that the clarification on the Congressional Medal of Honor / Presidential Medal of Freedom thing, he only meant that people who give him over $100 million in order to get their Presidential Medal of Freedom, they're better than Congressional Medal of Honor losers who've been shot up. You see, you get the whole point now. All right. Well, that's what, and they're equal, by the way, but they're not. And just, I don't know, that to me is one of the most astonishing things that he said. I know there's an awful lot up there, just in the category of stuff he doesn't understand. There's a lot of dumbest things, but I mean, I guess really I'll be thinking of this one alongside ram the ramparts, take over the airports. I mean, it's that dumb. It's offensive to so many people and dumb. And I think that's probably, I was going to say, that's the one line I think probably likely could have been written, if anybody had written it for him, which they did not, by AI. That seems like the sort of thing that if you asked an AI chatbot about that and said, what's the difference between the two and which one's better, that they would say something like that, or they might say it's better to receive, I could see a chatbot saying it's better to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom because in order to get the Congressional Medal of Honor is a pretty good chance that you have risked life and limb. That's what the medal is for. And so it happened in war. That probably means you're either dead or wounded. Not always, of course. I mean, it's for conspicuous bravery, above and beyond the call of duty and such, but which you can accomplish without being shot. Hey, the late great Forrest Gump did it, so it could be possible. But yeah, I have no idea what might have been in his head at the time, but it does sound like the sort of mistake like that an AI bot could make, interpreting something and substituting one or two words from it out of the thesaurus and then ending up with a conclusion like it's bad to get the Medal of Honor because you get the idea. All right. So other stories. Let's shift gears and get back to other stuff here. As a follow-up to the stories we read just the other day about Judge Reed O'Connor in the Tesla-related cases, or the Elon Musk-related cases. Two things. One, I have an NPR article here discussing his recusal, and I think we got it right, is that he recused himself from one of the two suits, but not necessarily from all of the suits that he should be recusing himself from. And there was some argument like, okay, well, he owns Tesla stock. Surely he shouldn't sit in judgment of any cases that would affect the Tesla stock price directly. So anything involving Tesla. But what about Twitter cases? Are they closely enough related? Is there a conflict of interest if he is adjudicating, if he's presiding over a case having to do with Twitter, one of the other major public-facing corporations run by Elon Musk? Does that bear enough relationship to the Tesla stock? And at first glance, you'd probably say no, but I did get a message from, let me scroll back and see if I can find it. I think I got it in maybe it wasn't an email. It might have been on social media after all. And it might have been Matthew Rigdon, I think. It rings a bell for me too bad I didn't put it aside here. And then I got buried under a flood of Trump press conference and Medal of Honor stuff. But he was pointing out that it is related, or should be considered as related, and the connection is that Musk, like Trump, has great difficulty, or he might be doing it on purpose, but he has great difficulty obeying the real rules about how to administer multiple companies when you run them. But like Trump, he regards both or all of these businesses as his personal property, whether they're publicly traded companies or not. And secondly, he doesn't acknowledge any boundaries between them, or which company owns which assets. So what he does is he very frequently will take engineers from one company and just force them to do the work necessary to boost the other company. So he'll take Tesla engineers and they're software engineers, and it's a very software-intensive vehicle. I mean, it's different in kind, really, from most other cars on the market, not just because of the electric drivetrain. But he'll take them and essentially put them to work, forcing them to try to fix Twitter's problems. So it's actually, a significant fraud on both companies. And, so, I mean, to the extent that you're dealing with Elon Musk, if you're sitting in judgment of a Twitter case, but you own Tesla stock, it's more than just that there's a weirdo personality at the center of both, and that he oddly connects both, and the performance of both sometimes can rely on the performance of the other because of that weird connection, but he actually does divert resources from one to the other and ought to be called out on it. And so too should the judges, who, if they bail out Twitter, are by extension bailing out Tesla. So, and I'm sure he moves money and resources between them all the time as well. Just that's the kind of person he is, and doesn't pay attention to the realities of the separation. Okay. I don't know that we really have to go through this. This does explain what the suits are about a little bit here. This quick report from NPR from August 13th, Bobby Allen filing this one. Texas judge steps aside in Elon Musk's X case against advertisers. That's the one he got himself out of. U.S. District Judge in Texas has recused himself from a lawsuit filed by Elon Musk's ex days after NPR drew scrutiny to the judge's investment in Tesla. Did they catch it first? That's nice. And questions about Musk using the court to engage in forum shopping. But O'Connor, according to his most recent publicly available financial disclosure, also invests in Unilever, one of the defendants in Musk's suit against a coalition of brands. So that's another good reason to get out, I think. The judge reported receiving a dividend from the company in 2022 of $15,000 or less. And that's nothing to sneeze at, dividend-wise. Like, if you owned $15,000 or less of shares, that's a regular small-time investment kind of thing. I mean, $15,000 is not nothing, but, in the investment world it is. But the dividend? I mean, it may be just that's the category, $0 to $15,000. Well, okay, I got zero dividend from hundreds of companies, so I should disclose all of that. In O'Connor's two-sentence order stepping aside from the Musk case, he did not offer an explanation, so we don't know whether it was the Twitter investment or rather the Tesla investment or Unilever or neither or both. Last week, Musk filed a lawsuit against the World Federation of Advertisers, not the wrestlers, but advertisers, and member companies CVS, Orsted, Unilever, and Mars, noting that the matter will be heard by another federal judge in North Texas without explaining the decision further. The lawsuit claimed brands illegally conspired against X to deprive the company of advertising revenue, i.e. decided not to advertise there. The case has now been reassigned to U.S. District Judge. It's interesting. I don't know what to make of this. Is this a typo? Or is the judge named Judge? Is it Judge Reinhold if he were named to the bench? Judge Reinhold? Because this says U.S. District Court Judge Kincaid. Court records show. I don't know what to make of that, and I really kind of want to have an answer to that. I'm going to look up Judge Kincaid and see, although that sounds like a television show. District Judge Ed Kincaid, there's that. Is he from Texas? Yeah, Northern District of Texas. Okay, so I don't know. Ed is in, there's an E and a D in Judge. Is that? Okay. Well, wacky. Oh, and in fact, is he James E. Kincaid, but goes by Ed? I don't know. It looks like there's a couple different listings. So he may be J. Edward Kincaid and goes by Ed. Something like that. Okay. It might be Edmund rather than Edward. Wow. Well, that's a weird little typo. According to O'Connor's most recently publicly available financial disclosures, he owns up to $50,000 in stock in Tesla. You know what that is. It's described Musk's electric vehicle company, in case you didn't know. He also invests in and has profited from Unilever, raising questions about the judge's ability to preside over the advertiser case impartially. It is the second lawsuit Musk filed against a critic in O'Connor's court, based in Fort Worth, even though none of the parties are based in Texas. In November, Musk's ex, Twitter, not any of his ex-wives, sued watchdog group Media Matters over reports that the group released highlighting white nationalist content appearing next to brands that advertise on the platform. In that case, O'Connor has issued sweeping rulings in favor of Musk, including granting Musk's lawyers wide latitude to request hundreds of pages of documents from the nonprofit, a process known as legal discovery. This was approved before O'Connor even ruled on whether the Musk case against Media Matters ever had any merit. For 5 months, Media Matters has been waiting for O'Connor to rule on a motion to dismiss. Typically the first legal hurdle a lawsuit must clear before it proceeds. It has not yet been considered. Meanwhile, the nonprofit has spent millions of dollars complying with document requests that its lawyers have compared to harassment. By the way, if the defendant here were Donald Trump, he would say, but don't you have to rule on this dismissal first before I get put through the expense and rigors of disclosure? Why do I have to spend money handing over documents for a case that might not even proceed? Yes, most cases actually work that way. Oddly, this one does not. What was interesting about it as I was reading it is he probably didn't realize All right, well, he's suing Media Matters for this issue, but this issue is setting the table, really, for suing advertisers later on, and holy cow, I actually invest in a lot of those advertisers, and I'm shooting myself in the foot. Now, he's realized it and is trying to get out of this other case, but someone else will be presiding over it, but now he's put his own investments at risk by licking Musk's boots and didn't realize what he was getting into. Quite dumb, actually. But, general principle should have kept you out of that situation. This is actually a dumb premise for a lawsuit. No, we will not allow this to go forward, and that would have solved the problem. But he wouldn't have been, sufficiently servile to Elon Musk. And he probably thought he could get a luxury vacation out of it or something like that. Anyway, O'Connor is stepping down from the advertiser case, and that follows news that Musk's suit is already squeezing one of the lawsuit's central players, the Brand Safety Initiative, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, known as GARM, Global Alliance for Responsible Media, announced it was folding in response to Musk's suit. Bad news. GARM, I don't know how they say it or not, is led by the World Federation of Advertisers, which Musk is suing. In a statement, the federation said Musk's legal action caused a distraction and significantly drained its resources and finances. The alliance was created in the wake of the 2019 video. By the way, this is an interesting bit of background. If you want to know what it is exactly, what's the importance of this organization that is now shutting down because of what Elon Musk is doing? This alliance that he's shutting down was created in the wake of a 2019 video live streamed on Facebook of, you remember this one, a mass shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand. The guy live streamed his massacre. Remember this? The effort was a way to make social media ad placement more transparent and to have a collective voice to stand up against violent and extreme content on platforms. He was live streaming, and presumably there were advertisements going out over the live stream. So here he is live streaming a gun massacre. I think it was an attack on the mosques, right? In Christchurch, New Zealand. He's killing people, and there's advertising content popping up, and brands are going crazy. We can't be seen sponsoring massacres. No. Isn't there some way for us to protect ourselves from this? Well, we can figure something out. Let's get together and work it out so that there can be more control over where your advertising goes. That's the group that's folding because Trump is suing them. No, I don't care. You signed up for ads. If somebody decides to massacre somebody during your ad, nothing I can do about it. And in fact, if you walk away and just say, I'd rather not advertise there because there's a chance that I'll be sponsoring a massacre, Donald Trump. I was going to say Donald Trump, but Elon Musk wants to sue you over that. How dare you? Yes, you're going to be forced to sponsor massacres. And there's going to be more of them because that's free speech anyway. Well, anyway, now you know. Reed O'Connor, wise to not want to be a part of that, but I don't know that he's going to escape the stain of having already dealt with one of those cases and then shot himself in the foot. Other news, follow-up news. You remember our reading the other day of the piece from The Alligator, the University of Florida student newspaper at UF in Gainesville, reporting that now former UF President Ben Sasse had looted the place and stolen all the money and then quit the job. I just wanted to note for the record that the Miami Herald, like the big-time paper of record down there, everybody knows the Miami Herald, has also reported this story. But when I say that, I mean they have taken the work, not stolen. They have contacted, presumably, the daily paper, The Alligator, at University of Florida, and said, we would like to reprint your story. We want the Miami Herald to run the story. Your byline, the whole bit, noting that you're where it came from. Quite an accomplishment. I just sort of wanted to point that out as kudos to the student journalist there. I mean, what a coup. Not something that most student journalists get a chance to see happen. They wrote the story so well, well researched, so well crafted that they just said, yeah, this is like pro level work. We want to publish this. Not only is it important work, it was just well produced. And we're going to put it on the front page of the Miami Herald. I just thought that was really a remarkable accomplishment. So there, Garrett Shanley is the writer, and just in case we didn't remember what his name was, everyone should hear it 1, 2, 10 more times. Garrett Shanley, be on the lookout. I guess big things coming. I guess now he'll be going into journalism after graduation. So congratulations there, and thanks really to the Miami Herald. I mean, it's not often that if this was happening in New York, if this was a student who had written a piece for the Columbia Spectator, I don't know, NYU, take your pick, right? Anywhere in the country, and they wanted to run that story at the New York Times, the New York Times would have assigned their writers to it and said, steal this story. I mean, you can acknowledge where it came from, maybe, but that's not really New York Times style. They just lift the thing and re-report it like some cheesy online aggregating site. They do that pretty frequently. This, not only a great accomplishment for the writer, but kudos to Miami Herald for recognizing the quality of the work and just saying, we'd like to run your work. It doesn't matter to us that a Miami Herald writer didn't discover this news. It's important, and this is well produced. And maybe you'll come to work for the Miami Herald when you graduate. That's not a bad recruiting tool, to be honest. Okay, so other stories that need attention. One of which I promised ahead of time, which was, and perhaps we begin on this one because it's another long read. We need to turn some attention. What the F is going on in Russia and Ukraine? Now, here's the thing. At one point, Russia invaded Ukraine, and then there was a war. And it's been going on for a very long time. First, they invaded Crimea. We for some reason that gets neglected. But then a generalized war invading Ukraine frontally, right along their border. Anyway, no, you know all about that and all of the things that are caught up in it. But the new news here is this very, I don't know, it's quite amazing and up till now maybe inexplicable, but now we have an explanation for why it is that Ukraine turned the tables here. Russia invading many of the eastern provinces and still control these eastern provinces of Ukraine. Why you would, I guess, expect Ukraine to concentrate all its efforts on liberating those areas, but instead has said, you know what, maybe two can play at this game. Let's invade Russian territory. So in the last couple days, weeks, this has happened. Like I said, like a giant real-life game of Risk. They just understood that Russia was overcommitted in one area and they're going to do an end around. And if we can distract them, if we capture Russian towns inside of their borders, presumably they want to turn their attention to that. We'll see if they want to pour all their resources into liberating those areas and then therefore make it easier for us to perhaps dislodge them from the areas they've been occupying this whole time. The New York Times took a look at it, and you know how it is in journalism world when the New York Times takes a look at something and puts a lot of words in it and very large pictures to illustrate it. You are obligated to give it some time. Deception and a gamble. How Ukrainian troops invaded Russia is the headline they give it. I presume that they invaded Russia by going into Russia with guns and possibly shooting at people, and that would kind of do it. But this is a serious look at this, and a lot of names on the byline here: Kim Barker, Anton Troyanovsky. That's my best guess. Andrew Kramer. Constant Mehut, another wild guess at pronunciation, Alina Lobzina, Eric Schmidt, and Sanjana Varghese. I hope I didn't mangle too many of those. It looks like the work is worthwhile, so I apologize to any names that were mangled. The scenes were decidedly Russian, setting the scene, a Gazprom facility, flags with the country's signature 3 horizontal stripes of white, blue, and red, a supermarket by the name of something that's, I'm sure, very common there, and everybody knows how to pronounce it, but not me, Pyatorochka, maybe, supermarket. Oh, boy. Well, it's certainly recognizably Slavic-looking name, so there you go. The soldiers posting the videos, verified by the New York Times, were Ukrainian, almost giddily showing off just how easily they had pushed over the border and through Russian lines of defense in the past week. In the Russian town of Sverdlikovo, maybe, a Ukrainian soldier climbed onto another's shoulders, broke off the wooden post anchored to the town council building, and threw the Russian flag to the ground. In Daryino, a town 5 miles to the west, other soldiers also grabbed the Russian flag. "Just throw it away," a Ukrainian soldier said, grinning as another flexed his muscles. On August 6th, Ukraine launched an audacious military offensive, planned and executed in secrecy, with the aim of upending the dynamics of a war that it has appeared to be losing town by town as Russian troops have ground forward in the east. The operation surprised even Kyiv's closest allies, including the United States, and has pushed the limits of how Western military equipment would be permitted to be used inside Russian territory. Ooh, yeah. That's kind of a thing. For Russia, it was a moment nearly as shocking as the mercenary Yevgeny V. Prigozhin's march on Moscow. Remember that? In June of 2023? He's dead now. The vaunted security state that President Vladimir Putin, they give him the middle initials here, that's the protocol, Vladimir V. Putin, the security state that he had built crumbled in the face of the surprise attack, failing in its basic task of protecting its citizens. And the unwritten social contract that has largely accompanied Mr. Putin's 30-month campaign that most Russians could get on with their normal lives even as he waged war was cast into question anew. Mostly on the defensive, since a failed counteroffensive last year, Ukraine has pushed 7 miles into Russia along a 25-mile front and taken dozens of Russian soldiers as prisoners, analysts and Russian officials say. The governor of Russia's Kursk region said on Monday that Ukraine controls 28 towns and villages there. More than 132,000 people have been evacuated from nearby areas, Russian officials said. It's just interesting. The whole thing is fascinating. Would make for a great movie if it wasn't for the fact that it involves real-world death and destruction at the moment, but it's just one of those interesting, confusing things. Like, what do? You're a Russian person living in this border area. It had to have been on your mind for a long time. There's a war like 10 miles west of me, but I have nothing to do with it. And besides which, we're invading them, not them invading us. But what happens when somebody just shows up? There's soldiers have just shown up and they threw your flag down and say, "You're Ukraine now." Yeah, I mean, are they even saying that, or are they just saying, well, I don't know, we're here and we hate Russians in this town now instead of hating them from 10 miles west? Are they saying, "You're Ukraine? You're Ukrainian now? Speak Ukrainian?" Anything? I'm just curious what I think they're just occupying it for the sake of annoying the Russian government, but it must be a weird thing. I mean, happens all over Europe and has for hundreds of years, thousands. But I don't know. We're not used to it anymore. We're in the modern era. It doesn't happen this way all that frequently, or at least conquest, just outright conquest. Is that even? I don't know. We'll have to find out. Let's read on. Mostly, we read this. There's 28 towns and villages now under Ukrainian control, but to what extent and why, we're just still not clear. Russia brought war to others, and now it's coming home. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine said in his Monday night address. He gave a major address, even if Trump didn't. This offensive is a major gamble, especially since Russia dominates much of the front line in Ukraine and has made significant inroads in the east. And I guess they likewise must be exposing themselves to further drives to the west from occupied territory in Ukraine by diverting soldiers elsewhere. But I think they did upend the balance of things and throw things into confusion. If Ukrainian troops are able to hold territory, they could stretch the capacity of Russian troops deliver a major embarrassment for Mr. Putin, and get a bargaining chip for any peace negotiations. But if Russia manages to push Ukrainian troops out of Kursk and simultaneously move forward in eastern Ukraine, Ukrainian military leaders could be blamed for giving the Russians an opening to gain more ground, particularly in the Donetsk region. But I mean, I know nothing about the military strategy of it all, but it does seem like a fairly good gamble if it was just month after month of grinding slow losses. I mean, they're putting up a valiant effort, but if they're just being pushed inexorably westward, at least they get the PR coup out of this. And there is the chance of some bargaining. I don't know whether you can really bargain with Putin, but it does at least illustrate the weirdness that pro-Russian forces, pro-Russian people around the world who are taking the Russian side and all of this and saying, well, why don't the Ukrainians sue for peace? Why don't we have a peace plan that involves freezing the status quo as it is, and ceding Crimea and maybe even much of eastern Ukraine to Russia in exchange for peace? And now the Ukrainians can ask, well, why not also give us these towns? I mean, if it's all about just locking in the status quo and saying peace from here forward, then we should grab up territory where we can from Western Russia and just say these towns are ours, maybe even as compensation. Will it work? Is that the aim? I don't know. But when we come back, a little bit more from this, and that'll give us a chance also to consider returning to the stories we began yesterday about Trump's own plans for stealing back office, if possible, in 2024, beginning in Georgia, something we wondered whether we should add to the pile yesterday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on with our reading of the New York Times piece and see how much we can get through to get the gist of what's going on here. It does look like it's awfully long, and maybe if I stop interrupting. U.S. officials told the Times, it's the New York Times that we're reading, they were given no formal heads up about the high-risk mission, possibly because Ukrainian officials feared the Americans would try to persuade Ukraine to call it off, possibly because of Ukraine's obsessive concern over leaks. Oh, I put the emphasis wrongly there. Those are the two reasons why they might not have told the U.S. One, afraid of leaks, and two, we might have told them not to do it. And that harkens back to something that was mentioned earlier. There may be, at least for American weapons, like we may have armed Ukraine. You know how controversial the whole thing is, or when I say controversial, I mean Murdery, Trader Green, and a couple other of Republican weirdos who are pro-Russian and very affirmatively anti-Ukrainian make these objections. But then other people, more middle-of-the-road people, too, might say, well, we will agree to sell weapons, give weapons, whichever it is, maybe a little bit of both, to the Ukrainians for defensive purposes. So is it a defensive purpose for them to invade Russia proper? Some would argue, well, no, that's obviously objectively offensive in nature. Whereas others would say, well, realize that we're only doing this because we've lost territory down there. What we really want is for the Russians to divert resources here and make it possible for us to take back the areas that were ours, which is a defensive, or at least counter-offensive move. So who's to say? But if it creates complications to the extent that American legal requirements require either cutting back or refusing further aid because things are being used for offensive purposes, I could see where the Americans might try to discourage such a thing. I don't know if they would intervene on a strategic level and say, we don't think that's going to work, or not. But maybe. Anyway, they didn't do it because they didn't tell us about it. U.S. officials have said that Ukraine's cross-border offensive didn't violate the policy, right? Ukraine, as I mentioned but then skipped over, is also using American-supplied vehicles, arms, and munitions, despite President Biden's caution in May that Ukraine could only use American-made weapons inside Russia for limited self-defense strikes. Of course, they could just argue that this is such a strike, and it illustrates the problems of international relations, weapons, sales, and arms transfers always have. And we have that problem right now and have had it for several months in Israel and Gaza. And you find that, the greater American interest in supporting allies gets in the way of a reasonable interpretation of, war is confusing and you put it this way, one person's offense is another person's defense, or one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist, however you want to put it, and there's going to be differences of opinion and create problems for Americans. U.S. officials have said, though, that Ukraine's cross-border offensive didn't violate that policy. So there you go. Done. Are these the officials in charge of the final determination? I don't know. But some of them have said this. They are taking actions to protect themselves from attacks. Sabrina Singh, the Pentagon's deputy press secretary, said on Thursday. Now, there will be those who say, yeah, that's true, and it is. That's good. And then you will remind those people, well, but that's also what Israelis say about the way they use American weapons in Gaza. And that same person, some of those people will say, yeah, and it's good there too. I don't mind. Oh, but most probably, and if they're listening to the show, it's more likely that they would say, I don't know how to justify it exactly, but it feels good for the Ukraine situation, bad for the Gaza situation. Can't blame you. Does feel that way. And look, if war is confusing just in terms of which one is offensive, which one is defensive, and what about counteroffensive? Are they defensive in nature? Not exactly. They're just not offensive exactly, but they're not also, I don't know. So if there's gray area, there's gray area in the other one too. Don't feel too bad about it. And if you think it's hypocritical to think both things at the same time, work it out. You're fine. You're in good company. Don't worry about it. Anyway, Ukrainian officials have remained tight-lipped about the mission, including whether they intend to hold ground or fall back to defenses on their side of the border. Mr. Zelensky only acknowledged the operation publicly for the first time on Saturday. Ukrainian soldiers said they didn't know the plan in advance. Military analysts who spend their days tracking the war said they were surprised. This is a good example of how a modern, successful operation requires extreme operational security measures and deception, said Pasi Paroinen, an analyst from the Blackbird Group, a Finland-based organization that analyzes battlefield footage. How do I get a job at someplace, a Finland-based organization that analyzes battlefield footage? I could do that. I mean, not very well. Ooh, that exploded. That was cool. Holy mackerel. Play that again. I'd probably be fired. But it's probably a long process to fire somebody from their job in Finland. So that's great. I'd be protected for a while. He added that if analysts couldn't detect it, the Russians might not be able to either. Maybe. I don't know. A quiet buildup is the next section here. Better get moving. There were hints of what was to come. Maps of the battlefield compiled by independent analysts show that soldiers from brigades long fighting in the east had moved discreetly into Ukraine's Sumy, maybe S-U-M-Y, Sumy region, just across the border from Kursk. A drone battalion from the 22nd Mechanized Brigade, which for nearly a year has defended the beleaguered frontline town of Chasiv Yar, was spotted near the border in mid-July. I mean, that would tend to give things away, but okay. Troops from the 82nd Air Assault Brigade engaged in fierce combat near Vovchansk in Ukraine's Kharkiv region also shifted to the area. So did soldiers from the 80th Air Assault Brigade, which was at the forefront of fighting in the Kharkiv region this spring. How do they know all this? I don't know. Why didn't people put it together? I don't know. I mean, it is a pretty audacious move. But okay, a few Russians noticed. You'd think they'd say something. A report was submitted to Russian military leadership about a month before the attack saying that, quote, forces had been detected and intelligence indicated preparations for an attack, unquote. Andrei Guryulov, okay, a prominent member of Russia's parliament, and a former high-ranking army officer said after the incursion. Well, the key there, sir, is to say it before the incursion. But from the top came the order not to panic and that those above know better, Mr. Guryulov lamented on national television before falling out of a window. Any movement could have been misconstrued as a new defensive posture. The Ukrainian army sometimes splits brigades into smaller battalions scattered across the battlefield, and Sumy has long been rumored as a place where Russia might try opening a new front. Few expected Ukraine to be able to launch a new offensive. Ukrainian brigades were running low on ammunition. Even as new weapons started arriving this spring and summer from the west, an almost fatalistic mood had taken hold of many Ukrainians that they were losing ground in the east, foot by foot. Ukraine shuffled parts of brigades into the Sumy area under the pretenses of training and picking up new equipment, said one brigade's deputy commander, Lieutenant Colonel Artem, who asked to be identified only by his first name and rank in keeping with military protocol. I'm glad they're being identified by their first names because I think they're generally easier to pronounce. Heavy weaponry moved in. Soldiers piled into houses. The Ukrainians hid in plain sight. Officers were told to avoid wearing military uniforms when entering towns and cities so they didn't draw attention, said one officer who identified himself by his call sign, Tykhy, I guess, Tykhy, in keeping with military protocol. Now, come on. 2 military protocols. One, rank and first name. The other one, just call sign. Well, the first names seem to be easier so far to pronounce than the call signs. Anyway, it's interesting, right? They're detected by satellite and other observation moving into these areas. And then what? You put out a press release or something? Or you just walk around town saying, I'm just here to pick up stuff to weave potholders for my Mother's Day present. Whatever your cover story is. And apparently Russians say, sounds plausible. I'll believe it. And then if it turns out not to be true, I'll throw you out a window later on. Some residents noticed the buildup, as you would. Maybe they were reinforcing the border or maybe building something, said Elena Sima, the head of the Yunakivka district, about 5 miles from the border. Everybody was guessing. In the village of Kotin, the rumble of heavy tracked vehicles woke up Natalia Violina, oh my goodness, a local woman, a 44-year-old kindergarten teacher at that, several nights in a row. She assumed others heard it too, but in the village, she said nobody said anything. It's a war. Maybe, I don't know what's going on, but heavy vehicles. And when we say heavy tracked vehicles, I guess tanks, but also possibly armored personnel carriers. I will point that out. Okay. Even within the army, many were kept in the dark. Tykhy, the call sign guy, right, which means quiet one in Ukrainian, said some units were told of the mission only at the last moment. On August 3rd, Colonel Artem said his brigade commander summoned senior officers to a meeting on the side of a forest road to announce the mission's goals, to divert Russian troops to help fellow soldiers fighting in the eastern Donbas region, to push Russian artillery out of range of Sumy, to demoralize the Russians by showing their intelligence and planning failures. So, multi-purpose. Makes sense. Difficult challenges ahead, we're told, and that's the title of the next section. The Ukrainian military hadn't tried a serious push into Russia since the beginning of Moscow's full-scale invasion in 2022, as opposed to the one in 2014 that took Crimea. Commandos had made quick forays across the border, one in May of 2023 and another this March. They were claimed by 2 shadowy paramilitary groups with ties to Ukraine, the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom of Russia Legion. Sounds weird. Away from the fighting, the Kursk region posed an easier target than elsewhere along the 600-mile front in the east and south of Ukraine. I mean, it's an awfully long border. It's just weird that there are areas where you'd be like, we're at war with that country, and I can see it from my house. And there's no war going on here, but like we could cross there and fight if we want, and they could come in. We'd never know when they're going to come across. I mean, is there fencing? Is there trenches? I don't know. Away up for 600 miles, I doubt it. And if there is, I know a guy who'd like to talk with you about that. Anyway, yes, so 600-mile front with Ukraine and Russia. It had fewer anti-armored vehicle ditches, so I guess that's, across the board what you find by way of border defense. I guess fewer of them in this area that this attack took place. Fewer of the anti-tank pyramid obstacles known as Dragon's Teeth, and fewer manned fighting positions, said Brady Afric, an American analyst, not African, despite the fact that the guy's last name is Africa, but instead of the A at the end, there's the K. Afric. Brady Afric, an American analyst who maps Russia's defenses. Russia also appeared to have sown fewer mines in the Kursk region than in occupied Ukrainian territories. Russia's fortifications in Kursk are less dense than in other areas where Russian forces have built formidable defenses, such as in the south, Mr. Afric said, by way of reaffirming exactly what we just learned in the previous paragraph. Just before noon on August 6th, Russian authorities claimed about 300 soldiers, more than 20 armored combat vehicles, and 11 tanks from Ukraine's 22nd Mechanized Brigade crossed into the country. But those initial reports were greeted with a shrug. Disinformation and propaganda have become another kind of front in this war, and no one thought such an incursion made any tactical sense. That is interesting. It's a little bit like the Titanic distress message. You know, we hit an iceberg, we're sinking, come and help us. And nobody rushed to their aid because everyone thought it was a joke. That's the unsinkable ship, right? I guess that they're having a laugh. No, it really happened. Hundreds more Ukrainian forces surged forward, breaching border checkpoints and pushing through two lines of defense. With fewer mines and fewer anti-military obstacles, Ukrainian mechanized brigades moved quickly. Here's a little bit of a parallel here, I guess, to the Gaza war in the sense that when the Gazans broke through the border defenses and made their incursion on October 7th, caught everybody by surprise, didn't think they were going to do it, didn't make any tactical sense, and yet it had happened. Alexander, a Ukrainian infantry soldier who declined to give his last name, remember, protocol, said many Russian soldiers fled as the Ukrainians pushed forward. 8 Russian soldiers surrendered at one checkpoint, he added. And it becomes a little bit clearer about why they surrender that way when we read, we've read things like it leading up to this, but apparently now in reaction to this incursion into Kursk, I've seen reports that they're just rounding people up all over Russia, 70-year-olds, people in jail, not recruiting their best, as Trump might say, but just pushing everyone to the front. And a lot of them are just like, well, I will be killed if I don't go. I might be killed if I do go, but I could always just surrender the minute I see somebody from the other side. And maybe that's even better odds than defying conscription. Anyway, moving on here. Early Wednesday, senior U.S. officials woke up to a shock. They learned that more than 1,000 regular Ukrainian army forces had crossed the border the day before, equipped with mobile air defenses and electronic warfare equipment to jam Russian radar. Some were driving in armored vehicles sent by Germany and the United States. The soldiers appeared to be planning for an extended fight. They brought a lot of snacks, I guess. As late as Thursday, U.S. officials said they were still seeking clarity from Ukrainian officials on the operation's logic and rationale. Since then, Ukrainian leaders have briefed senior U.S. officials and top military commanders on their goals, although they haven't had a great record telling top Americans what was going on in Eastern Europe in the past. But they had been speaking to Republicans who, after all, were essentially pro-Russian at the time and ready to turn the whole operation over to Donald Trump, which is why they didn't have any luck warning them about these invasions. Anyway, the American officials said they were surprised at how well the operation had gone so far, but they were skeptical that the Ukrainians could hold on to their gains. And in making the incursion, they said, Ukraine has created new vulnerabilities along the front where its forces are already stretched thin. Videos show Ukrainian forces may have faced resistance at times, although there is not visual evidence of widespread losses. Outside the Russian village of, should we try? Kremyanoye, maybe. A video filmed by a Russian soldier shows Russian soldiers ransacking a captured Ukrainian armored vehicle and taking away what appeared to be ammunition and other supplies. In another video filmed a few hundred meters away, a Russian soldier tried to rip a Ukrainian flag patch from the uniform of a dead soldier lying in the grass. Couldn't do it. Other footage posted on Telegram by Russia's Ministry of Defense appeared to show Russian forces firing on a Ukrainian brigade around the Kursk region. We all have joy in our hearts, the Ukrainian soldier Alexander said in a phone interview at 5 p.m. on Thursday from somewhere inside Russia, but we realize that there are still difficult challenges ahead. And I assume this is last Thursday, not just yesterday. This wouldn't have made it into print. I had this in the queue already. Some Ukrainian troops haven't been able to stop themselves from publicizing their moves. They've posted videos and selfies from Russian towns like Sudza or villages like Poros and Dmitriukov, bragging about how they have finally taken the fight to Russia. I bet they pronounced it right in their videos. Outside of Pyatyorchka, the Pyatyorchka store in Sudza, about 6 miles from the Russian border, one Ukrainian soldier said that a Ukrainian supermarket chain, ATB, was much better. Glory to Ukraine, he said in a video, which, like others, were verified by the Times. No, Pyatyorchka, ATB will be here soon. Okay, well, that's a good joke, and he probably even said it right. 4 Ukrainian soldiers posed outside a nearby Gazprom facility, the Russian state-owned gas monopoly. From Sudza, our news is as follows. The town is controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine, one said, holding a rifle and standing in front of 3 soldiers brandishing a blue and yellow Ukrainian flag. Peace in the town. All houses are intact. He added, I wish everyone a peaceful sky. All right. Nice of you. One video filmed by Ukrainian forces showed Ukrainian armored vehicles gliding along roads and through open fields in the Kursk region. Another showed a convoy of a dozen or so burned Russian vehicle husks near the town of Rilsk, some 20 miles inside Russian territory. Bodies could be seen in the backs of some of the trucks. That's too bad for those folks. But I like them better than Congressional Medal of Honor winners because reasons. About 3 days after the incursion began, a Ukrainian strike destroyed an apparent munitions depot at Russia's Lipetsk military airfield in the neighboring region. Whether or not the strike was directly related to the ground advance, Ukraine's Kursk campaign de facto benefits, said George Barros, an analyst with the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War. Sounds like he's in the right place. Getting towards the end here, finally, a haphazard evacuation described here for Russians near the border. This is of interest to me. The incursion arrived with loud booms. Roman, 49, a government worker who insisted on anonymity, except for the first name, I guess, because he feared repercussions for speaking to a Western news outlet, said shelling woke him at 3:30 a.m. in his village outside Sudza on August 6th, the first day of Ukrainians' incursion. No, sir, the shelling is very unusual. The next day, he and his wife drove to Kursk, not really the direction I would have gone. That's the region's capital, because they knew that, their daughter's school wouldn't soon reopen. What? I don't know what that means. Are they going to pick up the daughter because she's in Kursk, or did they flee because schools closed anyway? What? The next day, he and his wife drove towards Kursk, the regional capital, because they knew their daughter's school wouldn't soon reopen. Okay. That night, they returned to evacuate their parents. They drove on side roads with their headlights off, stopping repeatedly to listen for drones. Roman said people inundated him with requests for help reaching their relatives. He and others said the incursion appeared to have come as such a shock to the authorities that residents had to rely on each other. Interesting, always, the breakdown of authority in wartime like that. A Sudza resident named Ivan, or Ivan, I'm sure, 34, said in a text exchange Thursday that he was trying to evacuate residents. Later in the day, he wrote that he was in the hospital. His car had been hit by shelling while leaving Sudza, leaving Sudza home to around 6,000 people. And he had learned that the coffee shop where he worked had been damaged in the fighting. We've all been ditched, Ivan said, insisting on anonymity. People are helping with whatever they can. The government doesn't care. On Monday, the government of Kursk said that more than 100 civilians had been injured and a dozen killed, although the figures could not be independently verified. The Times reviewed several satellite images captured since August 6th that showed, not captured from somebody, but taken, pictures, captured, that showed at least 24 structures were damaged or destroyed in Sudza, in a neighboring village. Another one. Gonchar Goncharovka. Oh boy. Including homes, an apartment building, a gas station, and support buildings of an arts school. As the incursion expanded the city of Kursk, whose name evokes for many Russians the enormous World War II tank battle nearby, in which the Soviets stopped the German advance, filled with people fleeing the fighting. Again, right? They must be up to here with this already. Oh, yeah. They lined up for help at aid centers set up by charity groups. Jan S. Furtsev, 38, an independent political activist in the city, they have those, I guess, said in an interview. Nerves were frayed, he said, by shaky cell phone service and incessant air raid warnings, and maybe even Russian nerve agents. Buses stopped when the sirens sounded. Those who couldn't afford taxis were walking to work or relying on strangers for rides. It's Uber, but for war, you know. Whether the incursion would change people's views on the war was another matter. On state television, the Kremlin played down the significance of the offensive. Makes sense for Russia. Rather than casting it as a consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There are a lot of different opinions about the war, Mr. Furtsev said. But as for what people think, everyone believes that this is a tragedy. And it certainly is if you're involved and caught up in it. And wow, really rather remarkable, and I just wanted to bring you up to date on, I thought this was a good picture of, okay, the confusion and uncertainty that obtains in the area. Just one of the weird consequences of this style of war, and, it's not exactly a strategic update on how things will go and no prediction of what's happening, but a little bit of catch up on what's going on in a major international story that we're overdue for. Okay, let's see. Another thing I wanted to get around to, and we'll have to use the last segment for it, but we can begin a little bit on it. I mentioned that there was a second story about Trump's plans for hijacking the elections beginning in Georgia. This one from Rolling Stone magazine, which, of course, is paywalled, but Justin, I don't know how he pronounces his last name, Glawe, Glawe, apologies to Justin, but has put together a story here under the title of Trump and his MAGA movement are actively, quote, hijacking Georgia's elections. Now, the story we read the other day certainly does demonstrate that there's something afoot in Georgia. This, too, a bit of a long read. I'm curious as to whether or not it sheds any more light on things. But maybe the thing to do really here is to read to you from the diary at Daily Kos that Scott sent to me, Why Trump Doesn't Care About Winning the Swing States, which outlines the, I guess you have to call it legal underpinnings of this whole plan. Why are they seeking to do the things that they're doing? I mean, yes, to steal the election, but what are the mechanics of it? And to me, I dismissed it, as the same as last time. It is, and you can't dismiss it because it resulted in an insurrection. But when I say dismiss it, I mean, I think we are all up to speed on what's the benefit that Trump people think they get from delaying certification either of the election results or the electoral college results or both. Why is pushing delay in certifying elections important to them? And I'm not certain that it occurs to everyone what those mechanics are. It occurs to me because it's kind of basic constitutional stuff, but we haven't had to fall back on this constitutional process for 200 years. So what's the story here? Why Trump doesn't care about winning the swing states? It was Stelline who had written the piece, and we'll begin with just a little bit of it before we take a short break, and then we'll return to it. Until the 2020 election, the Republican strategy for obtaining presidential power with a minority of the popular vote was focused on winning the Electoral College by focusing on winning those few swing states that would make it possible, right? However, in the 2020 election, when this strategy did not work, it became apparent that adopting a different strategy was required to maintain power as a minority. Instead of relying on the Electoral College, their new approach has been to focus on the relatively unnoticed provisions in the Constitution that kick in if Congress has not, quote, elected a president before the time fixed for the beginning of a new term, or if the president-elect shall have failed to qualify. More on that after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, so recapping what we're doing and why we're doing it. Reading from Staline's Daily Coast Diary, why Trump doesn't care about winning the swing states. It occurred to me that I maybe passed over this a little bit too quickly. I don't know whether everyone in the audience knows. This is one of those things that I'm like, well, of course it says in the Constitution that this is the way it works. I mean, hasn't everybody read the Constitution? Yeah, sure, but, not everybody remembers. But this is one of those procedural things that's, constantly on my mind. So I'm like, yeah, of course that's it. But not everybody necessarily knows it. So I thought this would be a good primer on the mechanics and why the Trump forces thought there was some particular benefit to delaying things. In the case of January 6th, the Electoral College count. But all of these things, there are several steps along the way, verifying election results, and a lot of it is very mechanical and very procedural, and it's done this way, for the purposes of verifying and, giving official weight to the election results that is supposed to be indisputable, but, now everything is disputable. But anyway, this focuses on why they thought delaying the results would be a good idea, right? Or work in their favor. That, the 2000, I really would have put it this way, the 2016 strategy was, well, if we win just enough popular votes in swing states to win their electoral votes, then yes, we can win the election without winning the popular vote. We've had that happen before, and in recent memory, in recent life, George W. Bush was elected that way. So it made sense as a strategy. Come 2020, when it wasn't, and now everyone had seen how Trump governed, it wasn't going to be all that easy necessarily to win all of the electoral votes they needed. So what could they do about it? Well, they looked in the Constitution and found, well, essentially this. It comes to this, right? Everybody votes. You count up the popular votes in each of the states. You allocate the Electoral College votes as the states do. Most states simply say winner takes all. Some states have different methodologies for allocating one or two or whatever of their Electoral College votes. But generally speaking, We know how it works. And then, so each state says, well, this is who won, and so therefore that's who's entitled to be in the Electoral College, and then the electors show up at their state capitals, cast their votes. The officials in each state who are responsible for such things say, I checked the IDs and made sure that the electors were who they said they were. They voted for who the report says they did. In fact, it was the winner of the election in this state. Here are all their signatures. This should pass muster. We send that on to the courts and to Congress, etc., and they can, with great confidence, say, yes, Joe Biden won the presidential election because he won the vote in each of these states that have sent their electoral college representatives' votes to us, and it is, as was reported in the newspaper, so help me God, and he's the president. Boom. What if you disrupt some, most, all of that process leading up to it, right? That was what the new tactic was. If we can't win the votes, and if we can't win the popular vote, we'll try for the electoral vote. If we can't win the electoral vote, what if we do something to throw that all into doubt? Or up to and including, what if we just forge electoral college certificates and send those and say, we actually won? I mean, I know I keep coming back to this, but I don't understand how people don't see how egregious that crime really was. I guess because it's so outlandish and maybe it didn't, quote unquote, didn't work. And so therefore we're not that concerned about it. No harm, no foul. But I mean, it's one of the most basic crimes you can commit against the United States, faking who's going to lead the thing, even after holding a popular election. I mean, it's really nuts. This is all I can say about it. I can't stress it enough. Anyway, maybe you don't know what happens if you can't figure these things out or refuse to figure these things out, right? Okay, so instead of relying on the Electoral College gambit in 2020, they had to rely on this other one. The new approach has been to focus on the relatively unnoticed provisions in the Constitution that kick in if the Congress has not elected a president. And does Congress elect the president? Not in so many words. But what if, most people, I think, have heard, well, you got to get 270 electoral votes to win, right? What if somebody doesn't? What if it's, I don't know, there's question about those electoral college votes? It's usually, the situation for not getting 270 usually arises, well, what if you have a three-way race? And just nobody gets 270 out of all of those electoral votes. It's not a plurality wins. It's got to be the majority. That's what the Constitution says. Well, okay, so if there hasn't been a definitive answer from the Electoral College because nobody got 270 votes, or the other alternative is, even if it's not a three-way race, right, what if you manage to convince, either really or just get people to fake it in Congress, what if you manage to convince the people who are counting the electoral votes, Congress, that there's something wrong with some of these votes, such that nobody gets 270, or no one knows what the real outcome is in this state or that state because fraud, illegal immigrants, whatever it is you're screaming about, whether it's true or not. They don't really have to, I don't think they care whether the accusations are true. They just wanted to create confusion. Why? Because if a certain time arrives and Congress has not settled on who's got the 270 electoral votes, or no one has got it, or someone does get it, but then they realize that the president-elect fails to qualify, i.e., I don't know, he's an insurrectionist under the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which no longer exists, like you could come up with something like that, or he's 20, not 35 years old, or he's born in Russia, and we were all told that he was born in Queens and a billionaire, or something like that. That would be a problem. What would happen? Well, in this case, the House of Representatives chooses the president, not by the number of representatives, but with each state having only one vote, ! Stilleen tells us. This is the case, of course. Some of you have heard it, some of you have not. but the votes are cast by delegation by state, not by individual members of the House, such that even if Democrats were in the majority in the House of Representatives, it wouldn't guarantee that they would vote, all right, well, we pick the president, we pick Kamala Harris. It would be by state delegation, and as is explained later on, that's problematic. The new Republican strategy appears to be that if they can create delay in the congressional acceptance of the certified results for president until after the time fixed for the beginning of the next term, which is January 20th, 2025, right? They can activate this provision of the Constitution. No president has been chosen. And rather than being proportional to the electorate, each state will only get one vote. I know but you understand the concept, right? What they are banking on is that the number of small population Republican states is greater than the number of large population Democratic states. So one vote for New York, one vote for Wyoming. It's one of the worst possible outcomes, right? They don't have to win the votes. They just have to tie up congressional acceptance of the election results so that no one gets certified as having those 270 votes until after January 20th, when at that point they believe they would need only 51 House votes, delegation votes, to put Trump back in office. No, not 51. Remember how many states we've got? 50, right? You need 51% of the state votes, right? You would need 26 delegation votes for Trump, not 51. Okay, easy mistake to make. Anyway, this was the strategy behind the stolen election rhetoric and the fraudulent electors scheme before and up to January 6th, 2021, and of course the riot/insurrection on the day of. I know this seems like a basic review to me and maybe to our listeners who love process, but there are people who didn't know the first time. There are people who have forgotten. There are people who still don't know exactly what the Constitution says about these things or get the numbers wrong, as sometimes happens. So, the whole purpose of this conspiracy was to delay the acceptance of the certified results long enough for these constitutional provisions to be invoked by their co-conspirators in Congress. When they failed on January 6th, they did have a dry run, or while they failed on January 6th, that was a dry run, and this time they are using a different strategy for delaying the congressional approval of Electoral College votes. I think this was their strategy actually the first time. Events passed them by too quickly and they were working in confusion. And I guess they're banking on having their game plan mapped out better now. So I don't think it's a different strategy. I think it's the same one, but I think they hope to execute it differently. Here's the deal. Over the past 4 years, they've been trying to install MAGA election deniers into precinct and, where possible, higher up election official roles. They are hoping that if these officials, and I would have put that in quotes, if those officials refuse to certify the results in their precincts, they hope they can stop or confuse the official certification for their whole state. Some of these precinct officials have already practiced this approach in their states during intervening primary and state elections. There are a number of reasons why this strategy may not work, but if the MAGA Republicans can push it far enough, the interpretation of Section 1.3, as it's described here, in Article 2 of the Constitution, I guess that is Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3, and the 12th and 20th Amendments, and 3 U.S. Code Section 5, Certificate of Ascertainment of Appointment of Electors, may wind up as being considered up for interpretation, quote-unquote, by the Supreme Court, where a majority of justices have already demonstrated they are bought and paid for by the billionaire MAGA backers. When it was written, the constitutional provision for the one state, one vote and its subsequent iterations all focused on legitimate, and it was believed to be rare, tie votes among serious participants, serious candidates for office, presidential office. They did not anticipate parties intentionally trying to obstruct a legitimate result long enough for the exceptional remedy to kick in and override that result. 3 U.S. Code Section 5, the Certificate of Ascertainment of Appointment of Electors, and its subsequent amendments have attempted to make Congress's role ceremonial and to clarify that the Electoral College certification process such that it will be less likely that the congressional certification of the Electoral College votes would be manipulated to overthrow the legitimate vote. This code sets a deadline for the states to submit their own officially certified results and makes the governor of each state responsible for the official on-time submissions and provides for court-ordered submissions when there are disputes or other obstructions. Of course, there are also federal and state criminal laws that can and have been applied, ranging from election interference to fraud. While enforcement of these laws may deter some people, the hardcore MAGA believers seem to be somewhat immune from the fear of these sanctions. It is important for the Democrats to be ready for the normal election interference court fights that we can expect. Now there are normal ones, believe it or not. However, in this election, it is also important to proactively counter and be ready to counter the Republicans' ultimate goal to delay certification long enough to invoke the one state, one vote provision. It also would be useful if the media started making the public aware of the one state, one vote threat and how this plays into the larger Republican strategy. Now, I'm not trying to say anything about the author of the piece here. This is good information, and it is wise to distribute this information. It's unclear to me how long they've known about this information, but I will say this. They're absolutely right that the media should be talking about it, because when the media does talk about it, you occasionally run into people who, and I don't know if this is the case with Stelline or not, say, what? Oh my God, I need to tell people about this. Does everybody know this? Now, a lot of people do, but way more people don't. They just don't. And you got to say it over and over again, and sometimes you have to treat it like it's brand new information, and some people need to be introduced to it that way. And for some people, it just is brand new information. I don't know why, how, but it is. So, for more information, they also include helpful links to each of the provisions they mentioned. Section 1, Clause 3 in Article 2 of the Constitution, reminder here, and a link to it. If no person have a majority, the said House, the House of Representatives, shall in like manner choose the president, but in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having one vote. This one state, one vote procedure was carried over into the 12th Amendment, quoted herein, but in choosing the president now, the vote shall be taken by the states, the representation from each state having one vote. And if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president, whenever the right of choice shall devolve upon them, before the 4th day of March next following, back when they used to install presidents in March, not January, the then vice president shall act as president in case of the death, as in case of death or other constitutional disability of the president. But guess what? That got changed too. The 20th Amendment changed March 4th. That's some day for it. March 4th, everyone. March 4th deadline to the relevant time, or the relative, it says here. Now, time of before the time fixed for the beginning of his term, which is now set at January 20th. 3 U.S. Code Section 5, Certificate of Ascertainment of Appointment of Electors, right, provided more detail on the deadlines and responsibilities to force resolution of disputes and issues that might delay the congressional certification of the results. Additional details on the various roles and responsibilities of the Electoral College can be found at the links provided. That's a great primer for all of this. So what does that set the table for? It sets the table for the report we read yesterday about preparations for putting MAGA-related affiliated elections officials into these jobs, where at the precinct, county, state level, they might seek to intervene and just say, I don't know, I don't have any real reason for it. I just either think there's a problem with the vote, or I'm just willing to say that there's a problem with the vote, or just plain refuse to sign. It's my job to help be one of the 5 voices certifying election results in our precinct, town, county, state, what have you, and I simply refuse, and you can't make me sign that paper. Can you adjudicate a way around it in time to get those electoral college votes certified by the time the electoral college meets in December 14th, or even though I think we have to do that a couple days before, right, in order for there to be safe harbor for all of this. They're looking to just push things. If we just say I refuse or I have questions, can we push it past a date at which point it gets thrown to the House of Representatives? And then, of course, can we win and hold enough seats? Remember that the new Congress will be sworn in on January 3rd. So by January 6th, it's the new guys. And if there's an overwhelming Democratic presence in the House of Representatives, this whole thing falls apart. Could that happen? Well, in this atmosphere where post-Dobbs, we have extraordinarily red states ratifying new constitutional rights to abortions, well, maybe. It certainly could happen. So in the absence of that, what are they planning for? In places like Georgia, Justin Glaw tells us from Rolling Stone, Trump and his MAGA movement are actively hijacking Georgia's elections. Let's read it as much as we can quickly before the end of the week. After completing the MAGA takeover of the Georgia State Election Board, right, those are the people who, in the first instance, will be telling the state officially who should and should not be recognized for entry into the state capitol to cast their votes as electoral college members on December 14th. So after completing the MAGA takeover of the Georgia State Election Board, Donald Trump's allies quickly cemented his 2020 election lies into policy and moved to allow conspiratorial-minded county elections officials to refuse to certify election results if they see fit. That's all there is to it. If they see fit. Even before the election board granted broad powers to county election officials to deny election results and reopened an investigation into minor vote counting errors in Fulton County in 2020, Trump was publicly praising the work of 3 Republicans who hold majority power on that board. I don't know if you've heard, but the Georgia State Election Board is in a very positive way. They're on fire. They're doing a great job, Trump said at a rally in Atlanta on August 3rd, before naming 3 Republican members of the board, Rick Jeffries, maybe Jeffares, maybe just Jeffries, but spelled funny, Dr. Janice Johnston, and Janelle King. 3 pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory, Trump called them. 3 days later, the state election board met at the Georgia State Capitol. Over the course of 2 days, Jeffries, Johnston, and King outvoted a 4th Republican and the board's lone Democrat to pass 2 rules proposed by election deniers that will go into effect immediately. Why? How convenient is that? One of the rules allows pro-Trump election officials in Georgia's 159 counties to arbitrarily refuse to certify election results. Just no reason given. Just don't do it. Election certification has long been a ministerial rather than discretionary task. Does everybody know what that is all about? That means if you sued about it and went to court, the courts would say, if they were interpreting law correctly, and they're not doing that anymore, you don't have the right to just say no for no reason. It's not a discretionary thing. Your job is sign that paper. Sign the paper. Well, that was according to experts and judges, which to hell with them. Now, county election officials in Georgia could hold up certification of votes that are crucial to determining which candidate wins Georgia, a state where Republicans control the legislature, the Secretary of State's office. And remember, he's supposed to be one of the good ones, but he is ultimately a Republican and probably doesn't want to be thrown out of a window. So, Republicans control the legislature, the Secretary of State's office, the governor's mansion, and now the state election board in the form of a MAGA majority. The state election board has become a MAGA government body, says Max Pflugrath, communications director for Fair Fight, the left-leaning voting rights group founded by former gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. The board also voted to reopen a case in Fulton County, home to Atlanta, regarding double-counted ballots, ballot counting errors that were not nearly enough to overcome Trump's 11,779 vote deficit to President Joe Biden in the state in 2020. The rules rammed through last week were made possible by Trump's personal interference in the makeup of the board. I mean, remember, we're all being told, well, he's not really getting anywhere in Georgia because Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger, just don't really support his election lies. But they are Republicans. So what's going on? Well, as we said, the rules last week were made possible by Trump's personal interference in the makeup of the board. Earlier this year, as Rolling Stone reported, Trump privately lobbied Georgia Republicans to replace election board member Ed Lindsay, a relatively moderate Republican who did not broadly support election denier policies. After Lindsay resigned, he was replaced by King, a conservative media personality with no experience administering elections, and so therefore presumably easily manipulable. But again, there were four Republicans on the board and one Democrat. But one of the Republicans was still voting no, even after having replaced Lindsay. So it's actually pretty critical. Less than 3 months after King took her seat on the board, the MAGA takeover produced policies that will cause chaos, in November. Democratic board member Sarah Tindall-Ghazal told Rolling Stone, "I think it's important to put it all in context with what's happening in the last month," Tindall-Ghazal says, noting the surging support for Harris's presidential campaign. Yes, we've got some rules that are particularly egregious and threaten a smooth election process, but you've also got some particularly pernicious rules that will cause chaos right at the election. One of those rules may open the floodgates to county election officials refusing to certify results in November. Proposed by Michael Heekin, a Republican member of the Fulton County Election Board, the rule says that county election officials in Georgia's 159 counties must certify results only, quote, after reasonable inquiry, unquote, finds that the results are, quote, complete and accurate. Well, just decide that they don't, right? In July, Rolling Stone and American Doom, I don't even know, American Doom, oh dear, found that, is that right, American Doom? Terrible name. That at least 20 county election officials in Georgia have expressed beliefs in election lies or have refused to certify results in the past. Now, they have an even greater power to do so. Our state election board exists to protect the right to vote for all Georgians, not to favor any single candidate in any election. The Democratic Party of Georgia's executive director says, oh my goodness, how do I pronounce this? This is a new one for me. Tolulope Kevin, I'd love to be able to just call him Kevin, but no, Tolulope Kevin Olasonoye. Oh my goodness, I hope I got close on that one. Said in a statement, darn it. All right, well, should have prepared ahead of time. The three members Donald Trump called his pit bulls for victory, well, they disagree, and they're determined to establish a new power of not certifying election results should their preferred candidate lose, as he did in 2020. Last week, the board's fourth Republican, John Fervier, who was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp, warned that the new certification rule came without guardrails preventing abuse. And remember, everybody told us, oh, well, as bad as it was, the insurrection, the guardrails worked. Well, now the guardrails are gone. For that reason, I can't support the rule because I feel that those guardrails are necessary for that certification process, Fervier said. And he's right, but they're gone, and so is his other Republican ally from the board. Since 2020, election certification has been used by pro-Trump local elections officials across the country to call results of elections into question, largely considered a ministerial task that Democratic lawyer Mark Elias has called part of the pageantry of democracy. Certification has been weaponized, believe it or not. Weaponization, every Republican accusation is a confession. Weaponized by local elections officials who believe Trump's lies about the 2020 election. And since 2020, local elections officials across the country have, in fact, refused to certify election results at least 25 times. Rolling Stone and the strangely named American Doom have previously found. What Donald Trump is preparing for is to lose the election in Georgia and around the country, and to try to hope he will be spared a humiliating defeat by trying to work the refs, Elias said recently. It's actually worse than working the refs, but the refs, in Elias's analogy, not judges, but members of the Georgia State Election Board, who have handed broad power to local elections officials to refuse to certify results in November. The 25 attempts to deny certifications in elections, which have been repeatedly shot down by courts when they work, include refusals to certify in Coffee County, where pro-Trump elections officials helped election deniers working with the Trump White House to illegally access elections equipment. right? Certification refusals backed by Trump's election lies have also taken place in Spalding, Cobb, DeKalb, and Gwinnett counties in Georgia. And now these local officials have received state officials' blessing to refuse to certify results, says Fair Fight CEO Lauren Grow-Wargo. Lots of hyphenated names today. Since 2020, states like Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and others have seen election officials attempt to hijack certification, trying to delay or refuse to certify election results. And now local officials in Georgia have been given a manufactured sense of legal cover to refuse to certify results in 2024. There's a lot more to it. It's important, but I want to stop there, not only because we're out of time, but to reiterate something I have told you on the program before. Brad Raffensperger, Brian Kemp held the line. They were the guardrails against the attempted coup in Georgia in 2020. But I remind you that Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp both felt they were compelled to deny Trump's requests by the legal requirements then in place. And it was strongly hinted that if they had what they considered valid legal backing for finding those votes as Trump asked them to do, or delaying certification of the real vote as Trump asked them to do, then they would have done it. And guess what? They have spent the 4 years since, while clinging to this reputation that they have as moderates, as defenders of the guardrails, they have quietly given themselves the legal justification they would have needed in 2020 to do Trump's bidding, all the while saying that they were independent and just following the law. The law now says they can do it. The question is, do they believe they would survive 4 years in a Trump administration without being thrown out of a window to their deaths? And do they know that? And do they understand that? And do they understand that it is their duty to prevent that from happening? I don't know. I don't know if they know. I don't know if Justice Putnam knows, but he's the guy coming up next to handle things from here on in.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with Waldman.
Now, he's got his own stuff lined up, stuff that I forgot to get to, and I'm so glad he's going to be picking this up, because guess what? Just one day after Judge Merchan denied Trump's third motion to remove Merchan from the case, Trump's lawyers try yet again to put a stop to Trump's sentencing, supposed to be 34 days from now, looking for another delay.